Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I invite the forum to hear the voluntary national review by Jordan. It's my honor to invite His Excellency Imad Fakhoury, Minister of Planning and International Cooperation of Jordan, to make the presentation. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. On behalf of Jordan and the Jordanian delegation representing government, parliament, youth, women, civil society, and private sector, I am honored to present Jordan's VNR today. As you all know, Jordan, a 90,000 square kilometer country, is a middle-income country with about 9.5 million in terms of population, of which 3 million happen to be non-Jordanians. Half of them, at least, are recent Syrian refugees that have come to Jordan. Today, Jordan is the largest host of registered refugees in the world, both in absolute as well as a percentage of our own population. And in spite of that, we continue to represent a beacon of moderation, openness, inclusiveness, tolerance, a nation committed to homegrown comprehensive reforms, a critical contributors to peace, security, stability in a very turbulent region, to inter and intrafaith and cross-civilizational dialogue, and a frontline state in the fight against terrorism and extremism, and one of the top countries contributing to peacekeeping operations with the UN. Today's population of Jordan, 2/3 of them are under the age of 30. The economic, political, and social empowerment of women and youth represents the key priority target of our SDG roadmap and the most critical cross-cutting theme to achieve the 2030 agenda. But one has to understand also that we work within a regional context that over the past 7 years has witnessed unprecedented regional crises and conflicts that have imposed an economic siege on the country, increased our population by 20%, and because of the waves of Syrian refugees. And this has challenged us to the maximum. However, we have challenged the world by our resilience, the heroism and generosity of our own population, and showed a shining, hopefully, example in a region that lost most hope and is working hard to preserve its development gains under the MDGs while still remaining committed to our reform path and achieving the sustainable development gains. Jordan's actions to achieve the SDGs have very much built on the lessons learned from the MDGs, the heavy engagement in the post-2015 consultations, and the smooth transition that has been followed to adopt the SDGs. We have actually started immediately in 2015 to integrate the 2030 agenda into our national planning framework. We agreed on a set of guiding principles, emphasized the importance of involving everyone in the process, and we reviewed our national planning framework. We built on the existing institutional framework. We developed the roadmap to ensure ownership of the SDGs by all stakeholders. We conducted a thorough mapping of the goals, the targets, the indicators, as contrasted to our national development framework to identify the starting point. We've also adopted a set of guiding principles, full national leadership under the Ministry of Planning and International Cooperation, headed by a national committee, a higher committee for sustainable development. We placed equal importance on learning from the process and building on the momentum of the SDGs. We decided not to start from scratch and build on the experience that Jordan gained during the MDG process, ensured the full participation of all as represented by our delegation today. We even consulted with representatives of Syrian and other refugees who we understand will be there for a while in order to ensure the best path to achieving the sustainable development goals process. On the enabling environment, Jordan has undertaken a number of political and economic reforms over the past 10 years that have set a very good scene for a robust policy framework conducive to the SDG implementation. We developed a national socio-economic blueprint, the Jordan 2025, to achieve a prosperous, resilient, inclusive economy while strengthening reform and inclusion. So it was very easy for us, and it had factored in most of the SDG requirements. We have been using our national integrated development framework, what we call the 3-year executive development plans of the government, to integrate the sustainable development goals and their targets. And we also have developed what we call the Tier 1 SDG indicators, and we found out that most of them are already existing within our national development framework indicators. We've used our monitoring framework for our national integrated development plan to monitor the implementation of the SDGs, which is actually, and the national development framework is our basis for setting the national budget, a 3-year budget that gets approved in Parliament, so we ensure that funding is being allocated to the priority areas under the different SDG requirements. And we've been doing subnational plans across all the 12 regions in Jordan, the 12 governorates, and we are going to pilot starting with 2 regions and hopefully build on the subnational planning across the board. We have also ensured that there are no overlapping mechanisms, and we are building, as I mentioned, on the existing frameworks. Where needed, we are better aligning the SDG. For example, as part of the National Higher Committee for Sustainable Development that is overseeing the next 15 years and the SDG agenda, we have strengthened the participation of private sector, NGOs, and specialized organizations, and we've added 2 working groups as opposed to the MDG period, one on gender equality and one on human rights and freedom of expression, to ensure that there is a full overlapping between all the 17 SDGs and on our national working groups pursuing the national integrated development frameworks. On the interlinkages between the working groups and the SDGs, we have actually conducted a very good mapping to ensure that this is all mapped quite well under the different SDG goals, and that all the working groups nationally are fully aligned to oversee and interact with the progress under the different SDGs. Our roadmap to achieve the SDGs was adopted by engaging all the stakeholders in a process that started in March 2016 that has 11 components, from raising awareness to mapping and ensuring the policy coherence, to mainstreaming the SDGs, to mainstreaming into the subnational plans, to strengthening the national statistical systems. The gender mainstreaming component was highlighted as a separate and a critical one, and the further strengthening of the institutional mechanisms, in addition to doing an SDG costing process, the financing requirements, enhancing the monitoring and evaluation systems, and the capacity development requirements to get us there. We mapped, of course, the goals and the targets and the indicators to make sure they are mainstreamed into our national development framework, and the future integrated national development frameworks will fully mainstream all what we have seen over the past 2 years to achieve that. On the indicators, we have about 40% of the indicators, what we classify as Tier 1, are already there being measured by our Department of Statistics. However, we are clearly calling on the UN system with support on the Tier 2 and Tier 3 indicators, where we need to cover these gaps in the coming few years so we could actually have the right measurement system in place. On the where do we want to be by 2030, we have highlighted some of the key indicators we want to achieve under poverty, under health, under infant mortality, on education and water consumption, the mix of renewable energy, and these are some of the type of ambitious targets that we believe we are working towards to achieve in our process. Are we on track in terms of the SDG implementation? Yes, very much. We are on track, committed to achieving strong political will at all levels, building on the commendable achievements we have on the MDGs process. But there is a but, which is the challenges we face. One, which is very clear, the regional instability is very much putting us under economic siege. tremendously pushing waves of refugees into the country, and this has created a regression in our hard-earned development gains under the MDG process, and this has to be factored in as we do this global public good in hosting refugees and our contributions to regional peace and security, that this is going to also disrupt our pathway towards achieving the SDGs if the international community does not factor in. On finance, the SDGs. Of course, we have to keep stressing the point and that with the international community, that the additional burdens we are carrying with the refugee population requires the international community to continue providing for middle-income country innovative financing and concessionary financing tools to enable us to continue to do the global public good while at the same time continuing our path to sustainable development goals. Allow me right now to request to share with you a short video on Voices from Jordan on the SDG process.
Ladies and gentlemen, by gathering here today, we acknowledge that the power of working together far exceeds any individual effort. This great General Assembly must address urgent world issues, sustainable inclusive development that can deliver more opportunity, especially to young people, and peaceful political solutions to regional crises.
Jordan has been one of the first set of countries that have developed a roadmap to achieve our sustainable development agenda based on our Jordan 2025 national vision and strategy, and by integrating the requirements to achieve the SDGs into our successive government development plans.
حرصنا على مشاركة الجميع من مؤسسات المجتمع المدني والمرأة والقطاع الخاص والأكاديميين واللاجئين وذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة.
يمكن لمجلس النواب أن يلعب دوراً أساسياً في تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة عبر تبني خطة تشريعية من أجل تطوير وتعزيز البيئة القانونية والتشريعية، وذلك بالشراكة مع الحكومة.
المجتمع المدني شريك أساسي في كل جهود التنمية، يساعد في تحديد الأولويات، يراقب، يرصد، ينشر الوعي، يبني القدرات ويساهم في كل الجهود الوطنية.
المرحلة القادمة بتتطلب منا تنسيق الجهود لإدماج الهدف الخامس حول المساواة بين الجنسين والغايات في الأهداف الأخرى ذات العلاقة ضمن الخطط والاستراتيجيات الوطنية.
أنا اخترت الهدف الأول. لتحقيق هذا الهدف يجب إيجاد فرص عمل تناسب الجميع.
أنا مع الهدف الرابع. حتى نحقق هذا الهدف يجب العمل على تطوير المناهج.
أنا بختار الهدف الخامس. لنحققه لازم نعزز دور المرأة بشكل أكبر بالعمل السياسي.
أنا اخترت الهدف السابع. لتحقيق هذا الهدف بتأمل من الحكومة دعم أسعار الخلايا الشمسية.
بدي أحكي عن دور الشباب اللاجئ السوري بخطة التنمية المستدامة. صراحة له دور كتير كبير كونه الشباب هو العمود الفقري للخطة المستدامة.
فأمامنا اليوم أكبر جيل شاب عرفه التاريخ، وأكبر فرصة لبناء وتمكين مجتمعات قانونها العقل ودستورها الأخلاق ومبادئها السلام والمساواة، الاحترام والحوار، العيش المشترك وتقبل الاختلاف.
Fakori for the presentation. I now open the floor for an interactive dialogue with the presenting country. Before I give the floor to the first speaker, Once again, I would appeal to delegations to limit their interventions to 1 minute each. Thank you. I have two speakers on my list. The first one is Children and Youth Major Group. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the informative presentation. We commend the government of Jordan for the inclusion of strengthening their data systems to generate disaggregated data in the roadmap that you have just referred to. I'd like to ask if the government of Jordan is planning to disaggregate this data in line with SDG target 17.18 and to ensure an adequate reflection of refugees in the data. My second question is that I'd like to also on that commend the government of Jordan for prioritizing gender equality and mainstreaming it in their VNR report. Yet we see no mention of child marriage in the report, which is an issue that is prevalent in Jordan, preventing many girls from accessing health, education, protection, and opportunity. What measures is the government of Jordan will be taking to progress target 5.3 on child marriage? Thank you.
I thank the representative of Children and Youth for this question. And the next and last speaker on my list is the representative of Persons with Disabilities Major Group. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like also to commend the efforts of the government of Jordan for the involvement of civil society in the implementation process of the SDGs. And I would like to ask about how the government of Jordan is going to ensure that the reporting, monitoring, evaluation, and implementation and accountability process of the SDGs is going to be inclusive for youth, children, women, persons with disabilities, and other representatives of civil society organizations, and how is the government going to share the information about the implementation and the results of the SDGs in Jordan? Thank you.
I thank you for your question, and I now invite His Excellency Imad Fakhoury to briefly respond to the questions from the floor. Thank you, Excellency.
Thank you very much. I'm going to answer the first and the third one, and I will leave the one on child marriages to our colleague in the delegation, the Secretary General of the National Women Committee. And I will add at the end if there's anything else. On the first one, yes, obviously we're adding in all our new statistical data and survey mappings that are including data sets for the refugees, because we have to deal with the reality. It's already 7 years, and as the largest host of registered refugees in the world, we've learned the hard way how long refugees stay in a country and what that implies. And for us to have good planning, we need to make sure we have the right data to help ourselves and help our case with the international community and the donors. And we're developing now the new strategy for the national statistical system with the help of the UN system that is factoring in all the requirements of the SDGs as we build on that and create the disaggregation needed. But I've warned, and we're telling the international community and the UN system that there is a big gap in the data, that we need to build the capacity of statistical departments, and this is not common to Jordan. This is a common issue across the board that needs a lot of support in the next few years to move us in that direction. On the last question, with regards to accountability of reporting, monitoring, on inclusivity of all the stakeholders, of women, youth, people with disabilities, and so on, we are a strong believer in open government. Jordan was the first Arab country to join the Open Government Partnership. We are, in all our work that we're doing, we are fully involving all the stakeholders. We are publishing all the reports, the data, positive and negative, putting it on our websites and our statistical systems, and because that's the only way for us to help ourselves move forward. We have a delivery unit at the Prime Ministry at the center of government that will be tracking. We believe in the strong role of oversight by Parliament, by civil society. Our higher national committee that is overseeing the Sustainable Development Agenda in Jordan has a very strong representation of civil society, of parliament, of NGOs, of the private sector, of youth and women, who will continuously be monitoring this process, and we will be disclosing all our data, input and statistics publicly on our websites and as part of the national reporting process on the SDGs. I'll hand the floor, please, to my colleague Salma.
Thank you, Your Excellency and Madam President. In reality, Jordan until 2010 was slowly progressing towards reducing the incidence of child marriage. Unfortunately, latest study have shown that we have an increase in the child marriage occurrence, largely among the Syrian refugees, which reached 43.7% and 11.6% among Jordanians. We have to realize that there are two levels of responsibility here. One responsibility, of course, is taken by the Jordanian government. We have already, the study by the Higher Population Council has come up with recommendations and with a matrix that has been delivered to several governmental and civil society organizations with actions at the short term, medium term, and long term, focusing on changing social attitudes, changing legislations, and affecting education. And also, at the same time, we have to recognize that changing legislation is not enough, and that's why we're working on all levels. But also, we need to realize that the increase in the refugee, there is an international commitment towards improving the lives of the Syrian refugees. 90% of those are under poverty and unemployed, and this is really affecting the realities of girls within the Syrian community, but as well, this is also pressuring the realities of Jordanians in terms of poverty and unemployment, and reflecting again on the regression on even the Jordanian numbers in terms of percentages. So there is another call again. I repeat what His Excellency has said, that there is a responsibility of us to focus on ensuring that the influence, that what's happening to the refugees and the influence on the Jordanian community does not end up reflecting on the realities of girls and children within both communities. Thank you.